The smell of fresh coffee filled my nostrils as I stepped through the mahogany double doors at 6:42 a.m. The soft hum of the heating system greeted me like an old friend. 10 years. That's how long I'd been walking through these doors, breathing this air, making this place my second home. The marble floors gleamed under my feet as I crossed the lobby, nodding to the security guard who always arrived 5 minutes after me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Morning, Miss Johnson. Morning, Frank. How's the grandkid? Growing. Like a weed. 6th grade now? Can you believe it? I smiled, pressing the elevator button for the 15th floor. 15 floors up, and I'd climbed every metaphorical step of them over the past decade. Starting as a junior analyst, working weekends, staying late, proving myself again and again. Now, as deputy director of operations, I could see the whole city from my corner office window. The elevator dinged, and I stepped out onto a thick burgundy carpet. The walls were adorned with landscape paintings I'd personally selected during the office renovation 3 years ago. My heels clicked softly as I made my way to my office, the first on the left. I'd earned this position, this view, this respect. I set my briefcase down and powered on my computer. The familiar ping of emails loading made me smile. Another day at Henderson & Associates, the commercial real estate firm that had become my life's work. We specialized in high-end property management, and I'd personally overseen portfolios worth over $800 million during my tenure. "Sarah," Jennifer called from the reception desk as I passed by with my second cup of coffee. "Mr. Henderson wants to see you in the conference room at 8:30. "Thanks, Jen. Do you know what it's about?" She shrugged, but something flickered across her face. Concern? Pity? I couldn't tell. "No clue. He scheduled it this morning." I nodded and headed back to my office. Robert Henderson, the CEO and founder, rarely called impromptu meetings. Usually, our interactions were scheduled well in advance, allowing him to prepare his talking points while giving me time to gather necessary reports. This was unusual. At exactly 8:28, I walked to the conference room. The massive oak table dominated the space, with 12 leather chairs arranged around it. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Chicago, offering a breathtaking view of the financial district. I'd been in hundreds of meetings here, negotiating deals, presenting quarterly reports, and strategizing expansion plans. Robert was already there, looking impeccable in his navy Armani suit. At 62, he maintained the sharp appearance that had helped him build this firm from a small operation 30 years ago. Accompanying him were Patricia Wong, our CFO, and Michael Stevens, the HR director. The somber expressions on their faces immediately set off alarm bells. "Sarah, please have a seat." Robert gestured to the chair across from him. I sat down, my hands clasped in my lap. Something was definitely wrong. In 10 years, I'd never seen this particular combination of executives together outside of major company events. "I'll get straight to the point," Robert began, his voice carrying that authoritative tone I'd admired for so long. "We're making some strategic changes to the company structure." "Okay," I replied, waiting for more context. Patricia slid a thin folder across the table. "We've decided to consolidate several departments to increase efficiency." My stomach tightened. I opened the folder, already knowing what I'd find. The words blurred slightly as my eyes scanned the page. Position elimination. Effective immediately. Severance package details. "You're firing me?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "It's not personal, Sarah," Michael interjected, his HR training evident in his measured tone. "This is purely a business decision. We're restructuring to bring in fresh perspectives and newer approaches to property management." Fresh perspectives, newer approaches, the corporate euphemisms for "you're too comfortable, too set in your ways." "I don't understand," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. My performance reviews have been exemplary. I've exceeded targets every quarter for the past 5 years. I just closed the Morrison deal last month, bringing in $12 million in commissions. Robert leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. Your dedication has never been in question. You've been an asset to this company. But sometimes businesses need to evolve, and that means making difficult decisions. Evolution. As if getting rid of your most experienced employee was some natural progression. We're bringing in a new generation of managers, Patricia added. People who grew up with technology, who understand social media marketing, virtual property tours, and digital client engagement. I almost laughed. Did they forget that I had implemented our first digital client portal? That I had trained their new generation on the systems I helped develop? I see, I said, though I didn't see it all. 10 years of my life, and it came. Down to this, a folder of papers and 3 people delivering rehearsed lines. The severance package is quite generous, Michael continued, sliding another document toward me. 6 months' salary, continuation of health benefits, and we'll provide excellent references. 6 months to soften the blow of ending a decade-long career. How thoughtful. I'll need you to clear out your office today, Robert said, not meeting. My eyes. We've already arranged for someone to help with your personal items. Today. They wanted me gone today. No transition period, no knowledge transfer, just pack up and go. I assume my client accounts will be reassigned? I asked, maintaining whatever professionalism I could muster. Already handled, Patricia confirmed. Jake Morrison will be taking over most of your portfolio. Jake Morrison, 29 years old, fresh MBA, 6 months with the company. The same. Jake, who had asked me just last week how to structure a complex commercial lease agreement. I stood up slowly, gathering the documents. I want to say this has been unexpected, but now that I think about it, I've felt the shift for a while. Robert looked genuinely surprised. What do you mean? The missed invitations to strategy meetings, the CCs being removed from important emails, the way conversations would stop when I entered the break room. I shrugged. I should have seen this coming. No one responded to that. What could they say? They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. One question, I said, pausing at the door. Is this happening to anyone else? Michael shifted uncomfortably. Actually, we're expanding the junior associate program, bringing in 5 new graduates from top MBA programs. 5 young, energetic, expensive replacements, ready to work ungodly hours for the promise of quick advancement. I had been all of those things once, before I learned that the promise was sometimes just that, a promise. I walked back to my office, each step feeling heavier than the last. My nameplate gleamed on the door. Sarah Johnson, Deputy Director of Operations. Soon it would be replaced with someone else's name, someone who didn't know that the thermostat needed to be jiggled to work properly, or that maintenance should be called when the radiator made that clicking sound. My personal assistant, David, looked up as I entered. Everything okay? They're letting me go, I said simply. His face fell. What? But why? You're the best thing that's happened to this company. I appreciated his loyalty, but corporate decisions rarely considered such sentiments. They want fresh blood, new perspectives. That's insane. You know more about this business than anyone. Clearly. Not enough, I replied, sitting down at my desk for what might be the last time. I need to pack up. They want me out today. David looked like he might cry. This isn't fair. You've worked miracles here. Remember the Peterson Building situation? Nobody could have handled that but you. The Peterson Building. A 40-story office complex with a tenant revolt, a legal nightmare, and potential losses in the millions. I'd spent 2 months living and breathing that project, negotiating with angry tenants, dealing with city inspectors, and somehow turning it into our most profitable property. That was just 18 months ago. Fair doesn't always factor into business decisions, I said, opening my desk drawer. The first thing I saw was a thank you card from Mrs. Chen, a small business owner whose lease I'd personally protected when the previous landlord wanted to triple her rent. I kept it taped to the inside of my drawer as a reminder of why I did this job. As I gathered my personal items, a few plants, some family photos, the special coffee mug my staff had given me for my 10th anniversary, I thought about all the plans I'd made. The presentation I was supposed to give next week on sustainable building management, the mentorship program I'd proposed for junior staff, the industry conference where I was scheduled to speak in 2 months. "Can I help?" David asked, holding out a box. "Thanks." I placed my belongings inside, each item carrying a memory. The small statue from our Japanese clients, the paperweight from the Building Management Association where I'd served as treasurer for 3 years, the pen set from winning, Commercial Manager of the Year, 2 years running. "You know what's funny?" I said, more to myself than to David. "I've been so focused on this job that I haven't had a proper vacation in 5 years. Maybe it's time I took one." "You're being very calm about this," he observed. "What's the alternative? Screaming won't change anything. Begging certainly won't. Besides," I paused, thinking of something I hadn't considered in years. "I've got other options." David looked curious, but didn't pry. He'd been my assistant for 3 years and knew when to give me space. The morning passed in a blur. Colleagues stopped by, some offering condolences, others looking uncomfortable. Word traveled fast in office environments. I noticed how some people avoided eye contact, as if getting fired was contagious. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Around noon, Robert appeared at my door. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Thanks for asking." "I hope you understand this wasn't personal. The board has been pushing for younger management across all departments." "The board," I repeated. "And you agree with their decision?" He hesitated. "It's not about agreement. It's about the direction the company needs to go." I wanted to ask about the direction we'd been going for the past 10 years, the direction that had tripled the company's revenues and expanded our client base by 400%. But what was the point? After he left, I finished packing. 3 boxes and a briefcase. A decade of professional life reduced to cardboard containers. The walls looked bare without my certifications and awards. Someone would probably box those up too, or maybe just leave them for the next person to deal with. On my way out, I stopped by the break room. The bulletin board still had the announcement about my promotion to deputy director 5 years ago. I wondered if anyone would take it down, or if it would just fade away, becoming a ghost of decisions past. The elevator ride down felt different. For 10 years, I'd taken this elevator up to build my career. Now I was taking it down to start over. The lobby seemed smaller somehow, less impressive. Frank was helping an elderly visitor with directions. I caught his eye and waved goodbye. As I stepped outside into the crisp Chicago afternoon, I realized something strange. I wasn't sad. Angry, yes. Disappointed, certainly. But underneath it all was a feeling I couldn't quite identify. Liberation? No, that wasn't it. Then it hit me. Anticipation. I set my boxes in the trunk of my Camry and sat in the driver's seat for a moment. My phone had been buzzing with texts from former colleagues. Most were supportive, some were gossipy, asking for details. I ignored them all except one from my oldest friend, Monica. "Coffee tomorrow?" "Heard the news. Let's talk about business. Opportunities. Business opportunities." I smiled, remembering something I'd almost forgotten. Something that would make this whole situation incredibly ironic. I drove home, windows down, letting the city air blow through my hair. At 38, I was starting over. Most people would find that terrifying. But most people didn't have what I had. Most people didn't know what I knew. That evening, I sat in my apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. I'd bought this place 7 years ago, back when my salary couldn't really afford it. But I'd wanted the view, wanted the prestige of the address. Now, looking at the city lights reflecting off the water, I thought about all the secrets a city holds. I walked to my home office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Underneath old tax returns and insurance papers was a thin blue folder. I pulled it out, dust particles dancing in the evening light. It had been 5 years since I'd last looked at these documents. Inside was a deed, several contracts, and a property management agreement, all bearing my name, all related to a certain building in downtown Chicago, a building where I'd spent the last 10 years of my professional life. 5 West Harrison Street. 32 stories of glass and steel, owned by Aurora Holdings LLC, a company I'd established 7 years ago. The same building that housed Henderson and Associates. The same building where Robert Henderson had just terminated my employment. I bought it during a foreclosure auction. The previous owners had overextended themselves during the 2008 financial crisis. I'd seen the opportunity, used my savings, and a substantial inheritance from my grandmother, and quietly acquired the property. I'd kept my ownership private, setting up the LLC and using a management company to handle day-to-day operations. Why hadn't I told anyone? Partly for the same reason wealthy people often keep their wealth hidden, to avoid complications. But mainly because I'd wanted to prove myself on merit, not because my boss knew I could literally kick him out if I wanted to. Now, sitting there with these documents in my hand, I realized something beautiful, something poetic. Robert Henderson had just fired me, but in 3 days, his lease was up for renewal, and I was his landlord. I woke up at 5 a.m., the city still wrapped in pre-dawn darkness outside my bedroom window. My laptop sat open on the kitchen table, displaying the online portal for Aurora Holdings LLC. For the first time in years, I wasn't getting ready for another day at Henderson and Associates. Instead, I was about to dive deep into something I'd kept at arm's length, my role as a property owner in downtown Chicago. The files I'd retrieved from my desk revealed more than just ownership paperwork. There were quarterly reports from Premier Management Services, the company I'd hired to handle the day-to-day operations of 425 West Harrison Street. I'd been remarkably hands-off, receiving brief summaries while focusing entirely on my career at Henderson and Associates. Now, sitting with my morning coffee, I began reading through years of accumulated data. The building was in excellent condition, showing a profit margin of 18% annually. Current occupancy rate, 94%. Major tenants included not just Henderson and Associates, which occupied floors 14 through 17, but also a prestigious law firm, a marketing agency, and several startup tech companies. The ground floor housed a boutique coffee shop that served as an unofficial meeting spot for the building's professional community. My phone rang, startling me from my review. Monica's name flashed on the screen. "Coffee at 9?" she asked without preamble. "Actually, let's make it my place. I have something interesting to show you." "Even better. Should I bring bagels?" "Absolutely." After hanging up, I opened the online banking portal for Aurora Holdings. The checking account showed a healthy balance, with regular monthly deposits from the management company. Rent from all tenants, including Henderson and Associates, flowed directly into this account. I'd barely touched this money over the years, letting it accumulate while I paid the mortgage and building expenses from the income stream. Henderson and Associates paid $47,000 monthly for their space. Multiply that by 42 months remaining on their lease. I did the quick math. Nearly $2 million in guaranteed income, assuming they renewed. My doorbell chimed at exactly 9 a.m. Monica stood in the hallway, her usual whirlwind energy barely contained, holding a bag of fresh bagels and wearing her signature burgundy blazer. "Okay, So I've heard through the grapevine that Henderson just made the stupidest decision of his corporate life, she said, bustling into my apartment. But you seem remarkably calm for someone who just got kicked to the curb after a decade. Monica. Chen had been my friend since our freshman year at Northwestern. While I'd gone into commercial real estate, she'd become a financial consultant, specializing in property investment and business transitions. She knew everyone in Chicago's professional circles, and her network was legendary. Remember when I bought that foreclosed building 7 years ago? I asked, setting out 2 cups. She paused mid-bagel slice. The one on West Harrison? Don't tell. Me? I slid the deed across my kitchen counter. Her eyes widened as she read, then she burst into laughter. Henderson fired his own landlord? This is better than any soap opera. It gets better. His lease renewal is due next week. The laughter stopped. Monica's expression shifted to what I called her business face. Sharp, analytical, and slightly predatory. Oh, Sarah. This is perfect. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every aspect of my situation. Monica had me pull up the building's full tenant directory, the history of Henderson and Associates rental payments, consistently on time, I had to admit, and most importantly, the lease agreement they'd signed 5 years ago. Look at this clause. Monica pointed to Section 14.2. The rent can be increased by up to 15% upon renewal, subject to landlord's discretion. I never intended to raise their rent, I admitted. But now? She raised an eyebrow. Seems like the market has shifted. According to recent comps in the area, Henderson is actually paying below market rate. You could justify a 20% increase easily. I thought about this. I'm not looking for revenge, Monica. This isn't revenge. This is business. They terminated your employment. Now you're conducting business as a property owner. These are separate transactions. She had a point, but something still felt wrong about it. Let me think about it. Fair. Enough. But while you're thinking, let's talk about what else you can do. Monica pulled out her tablet and began showing me market analysis reports. The commercial real estate market in the Loop is on fire right now. Tech companies are expanding. Traditional firms are upgrading to attract talent. Your building is perfectly positioned. She explained how similar properties were commanding premium rents, especially those with recently renovated spaces and modern amenities. When did you last update the building? 3 years ago, I recalled. New HVAC systems, elevator upgrades, modernized security features. Perfect. And the management company has been maintaining everything properly? I nodded, pulling up the maintenance logs on my laptop. Premier Management Services had indeed been thorough. The building was in what industry professionals would call Class A condition. Here's what I suggest, Monica continued. First, review all your leases, not just Henderson's. See what's coming due, what's below market, what opportunities exist. Second, consider upgrading a few more features. The building lobby, for instance. The lobby is fine. Fine isn't premium. You want a premium. You've got a prime location, well-maintained structure, but those finishing touches matter. Modern art, designer furniture, maybe a digital directory system. I was beginning to see where she was going. With this, create value, then adjust pricing accordingly. Exactly. And timing is everything. Henderson needs to renew. They've built their entire operation around that space. Moving would cost them hundreds of thousands in downtime alone. We spent another hour going through financial projections. If I raised Henderson's rent to market rate, it would add nearly $100,000 annually to the building's revenue. If I made strategic improvements to attract higher-paying tenants, the building's total value could increase by millions. There's something else you should consider, Monica said, switching to a new tab on her tablet. Expansion opportunities. She showed me 3 commercial properties currently on the market within a 5-block radius. With your capital and this building as collateral, you could easily acquire another property. Create a portfolio. The idea was tempting. I'd kept Aurora Holdings small, simple, focused on this single property. But now, with forced career change and time on my hands, maybe it was time to think bigger. I'll need to understand the full picture first, I said. How Henderson operates, what their plans are, who else in the building might be affected by any changes I make. Monica nodded approvingly. Smart. Gather intelligence before making moves. I can help with that. I have connections in several firms that do business with Henderson. After Monica left, I spent the afternoon diving deeper into my property ownership. I called Premier Management Services, introducing myself as an active owner wanting to be more involved. The property manager, James Walsh, seemed surprised but pleased to hear from me. We've been running things smoothly, he assured me. But having an engaged owner always helps with decision-making. I scheduled a meeting with him for the following week, planning to tour the building as an owner for the first time. It felt strange. I'd walked these halls thousands of times as an employee, but never as the person who actually owned them. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I researched my own building. Not as a potential workspace, but as an investment property. Current market valuations, neighborhood trends, upcoming developments in the area. The data was impressive. Chicago's West Loop had transformed dramatically since I'd purchased the building. What was once a transitioning neighborhood had become one of the city's most desirable business districts. My building sat perfectly positioned, with excellent public transportation access and proximity to both the financial district and the emerging tech corridor. I also researched Henderson & Associates more thoroughly than I'd ever done as an employee. Their annual revenue, client base, competitive positioning. They were successful, no doubt, but not irreplaceable. Several other firms could easily absorb their market share if they were forced to relocate. This research led me to an interesting discovery. Henderson had recently signed 3 major clients, committing to handle significant property portfolios over the next 5 years. These deals required specific technological infrastructure and office layouts. Infrastructure that had been customized in their current space. Moving would mean recreating this setup elsewhere, expensive and time-consuming. I made notes of everything, building a comprehensive picture of leverage points. Not to be malicious, but to understand the complete business landscape I was now entering. As a property owner, these weren't personal relationships anymore, they were business partnerships. My phone buzzed with a text from David, my former assistant. Just wanted you to know, the new person taking your accounts is struggling. Already messed up the Willis Tower negotiations. Everyone misses you. I appreciated his loyalty but didn't respond. I was no longer that person, fighting for recognition in a company that had dismissed my value. I was something else now. Someone, with actual power, even if they didn't know it yet. Before bed, I reviewed the lease agreement one more time. The renewal process required 30 days' notice from either party. Henderson & Associates had exactly 7 days to initiate renewal negotiations. After that, the lease would enter month-to-month status, allowing either party to terminate with minimal notice. I wondered if Robert Henderson even remembered this deadline. As CEO, he likely delegated such administrative matters to others. But those others, his CFO, Patricia Wong, his operations director, they would know. They would have it marked on their calendars, scheduled as a priority item. The irony struck me again. Patricia Wong, who had sat across from me in that termination meeting, would be the one negotiating with me for continued occupancy. She just didn't know it yet. I fell asleep thinking about power dynamics, about hidden identities, about how Seattle's most successful landlords often moved through their own properties unrecognized. Some owned dozens of buildings, mingling with tenants who had no idea they were speaking with the owner of their workspace. Over the next few days, I gathered more intelligence. Not through subterfuge, but through public records and business databases available to anyone who knew where to look. Henderson and Associates had been growing aggressively, adding staff, expanding services. They'd invested heavily in their current office setup, including custom millwork and specialized technology systems. I discovered they were also courting a major international client, a European conglomerate looking to establish a Chicago presence. Landing this client would mean enormous growth for Henderson. Losing it could damage their reputation irreparably. I also learned that Jake Morrison, the young MBA taking over my accounts, had made 2 significant errors in his first week. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to worry existing clients. My phone had several voicemails from former clients asking if I was available for consultation. These calls intrigued me. As an employee, I couldn't work with Henderson's clients independently. But as a property owner, that was different territory entirely. The non-compete clause in my employment contract didn't apply to my role as a landlord. By the end of the week, I had assembled a complete picture. Henderson and Associates was vulnerable, growing too fast without the experienced guidance they'd just eliminated. Their physical infrastructure was perfectly suited to their needs, but would be costly to replicate elsewhere. And their new hires were struggling to maintain the standard I'd established. Most importantly, they needed to renew their lease in 6 days, and they had no idea who they'd be negotiating with. I drafted an email to Premier Management Services, marking it for delivery on Monday morning. Please prepare lease renewal documentation for Henderson and Associates LLC, reflecting current market rates for comparable commercial space in the West Loop. Also schedule a meeting with their representative to discuss terms, ideally by the end of next week. Additionally, begin preparing proposals for building upgrades that would justify premium positioning in the current market. I hesitated before adding one more line. Please ensure all communications regarding this renewal are directed to the owner's attention for final approval. As I prepared to send this email, my phone rang. It was Robert Henderson. I let the phone ring 4 times before answering. On the other end, Robert's usually confident voice carried an unfamiliar note of uncertainty. Sarah, I hope I'm not interrupting your weekend. I wanted to follow up on what happened this week. Of course, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What can I do for you? I've been thinking about the Morrison deal. Jake seems to be having some difficulty with the European contingency clauses. I know you structured that entire agreement and... He trailed off, the unspoken request hanging in the air. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the Chicago skyline. And you'd like my help? As a consultant, of course. We'll pay your standard rate. I almost laughed. Standard rate? They had no idea what my standard rate was about to become. I'm focusing on new ventures these days, Robert, but I appreciate you thinking of me. After we hung up, I realized this was the opening I needed. Within hours, I received 3 more calls, 2 from junior associates asking for guidance and 1 from Patricia Wong, the CFO. Sarah, I'm going to be direct, Patricia said. We made a mistake letting you go. The transition isn't going as smoothly as anticipated. Would you consider coming back? This was rich. What kind of position are we talking about? We could reinstate you as deputy director. Same salary, same benefits, same salary, same position. They wanted to pretend the last week hadn't happened, that they could simply undo a decision that had likely been months in the making. I'll need to think about it, I said, though I'd already decided. Can I get back to you next week? Of course. Take all the time you need. That evening, I called Monica to share these developments. They're panicking, she observed, and panic makes people stupid. What do you mean? Think about it. They're so focused on their immediate problems, the failed deals, the unhappy clients, that they're not thinking about next week's lease renewal. When Patricia calls to offer you a job, she's wearing her CFO hat. When she sits down to negotiate, Rent renewal, she'll be wearing a different hat. But it's still the same hat rack. Monica was right. Henderson and Associates was operating in silos, not connecting the dots between their personnel crisis and their impending real estate negotiation. Over the weekend, I developed what I privately called my intelligence network, not through anything unethical, but by leveraging relationships I'd built over 10 years in the industry. I had coffee with Rebecca Torres, who managed the marketing firm on the 22nd floor. She was friendly with several Henderson employees and mentioned they were all talking about major changes coming to the company. They've been interviewing for 3 senior positions, she revealed, but having trouble attracting candidates. Word has gotten out about how they treated you. This was valuable information. Henderson's reputation in the industry was affected, but they weren't recognizing the full extent of the damage. I also met with Thomas Kim, whose startup occupied space on the 8th floor. His company was growing rapidly and needed more space. We're actually looking to expand, he told me. Ideally within the building. The location is perfect for us. Another piece of the puzzle. Demand for space in the building was increasing while Henderson faced potential retention problems. Through carefully timed conversations, I learned that 3 of Henderson's top performers were quietly updating their LinkedIn profiles. The assistant, who'd replaced David, was overwhelmed and making scheduling errors. Most tellingly, their largest client had requested a meeting to review service quality, corporate speak for, "We're considering switching firms." On Monday, I called Premier Management Services and scheduled that building tour for Tuesday morning. Then I did something I hadn't done since buying the property. I walked into 425 West Harrison Street as myself, not as an employee. The lobby looked different from this perspective. Not just the familiarity of daily routine, but through the eyes of someone evaluating an asset. The marble floors were pristine, the fixtures modern but not cutting edge. The directory system was functional, but outdated. Monica's suggestion about upgrades made sense. I introduced myself to the building's main security supervisor, Carlos Martinez. "Oh, so you're the owner," he said, genuinely surprised. "I've been working here for 5 years. I never knew. Usually, deal with the management company." "I've been pretty hands-off until now," I admitted. "How do you find the building operations?" We talked for 30 minutes. He mentioned some maintenance items that hadn't been addressed, small comfort issues tenants had mentioned, and his observations about which companies seemed to be thriving or struggling. "That real estate firm on 15, he said, "they've been having some stress lately. Lots of late nights, people leaving in tears. Not normal for them." I thanked him for the information and made a note to suggest a building-wide tenant satisfaction survey. The next day, I met James Walsh, the property manager, at the building's management office. A friendly man in his 50s with 20 years of experience, he was eager to show me every detail of the property. "Your building is one of our best," he said with pride. "Low turnover, good maintenance record, strong cash flow." We reviewed the tenant roster in detail. 10 companies total with varying lease terms. Henderson's was among the largest spaces and highest-paying tenants, but not the most profitable when you considered square footage efficiency. The tech startups actually generate better revenue per square foot, James explained. They pack more people into smaller spaces. This gave me ideas for the future. If Henderson chose not to renew or couldn't meet new terms, I had options. We walked through the building systems, HVAC controls, elevator maintenance schedules, security protocols. Everything was well maintained, but James pointed out several upgrade opportunities. The elevator cabs could use refurbishing. The building entrance could have a more dramatic presence, and the common areas might benefit from renovation. I was taking detailed notes when my phone buzzed. Patricia Wong. "Sarah, I know we said you could take time to think, but we have a crisis. The Mendelsohn Group wants to terminate their contract. They're upset about account management issues and billing errors. You handled their portfolio for years. Could you at least consult on this matter? I glanced at James, who was explaining backup power systems. I'm actually in a meeting right now. Can I call you back this afternoon? Please. This is urgent. They represent 20% of our revenue. After hanging up, I turned back to James. Tell me about the lease renewal process. What happens if a tenant doesn't respond by the deadline? The lease automatically converts to month at 120% of the current rate, he replied. Most tenants prefer to negotiate a new fixed-term lease to avoid that premium. And if they want to leave, they need 60 days' notice for an orderly transition. But finding comparable space in this market could take months. I was beginning to see my leverage more clearly. While Henderson struggled with immediate crises, they were walking into a real estate negotiation where delay would cost them dearly. That afternoon, I returned Patricia's call from a coffee shop near the building. About the Mendelsohn situation, I began. Oh, thank God. Can you come in? This afternoon? We'll pay your full day rate for just a few hours. Actually, let's handle this differently. Send me the file details. I'll review them and provide recommendations. You're not coming in person? I prefer to work independently these days. She sounded disappointed but agreed. Within an hour, I had 3 large PDF files containing 5 years of client correspondence, account details, and the current dispute documentation. Reading through everything, the problem was clear. The Mendelsohn Group had been overcharged due to a billing system error, but more critically, their last 3 quarterly reports contained significant mistakes. Numbers didn't match their actual holdings, and strategic recommendations were generic rather than customized. This was exactly the kind of detail-oriented work I had excelled at, work that Jake Morrison, despite his advanced degree, wasn't equipped to handle. I drafted a comprehensive remedy plan: immediate refund of billing errors, assignment of a dedicated account review team, and complementary services for 6 months to rebuild trust. I also identified the system glitches causing the billing errors, issues that could be resolved with a software update I'd recommended 6 months ago. I sent this plan to Patricia with a cover note. Initial review complete. Full consultation available if needed. Her response was immediate. This is excellent. Can you implement these changes? We'll pay a consulting rate plus a performance bonus. Instead of answering directly, I called Monica. They're in free fall, I told her. Making offers they can't sustain, trying to fix symptoms instead of systems. And the lease renewal? Still haven't heard anything about it. Patricia just offered me work at 5 times my former hourly rate to save a client, but no mention of the renewal deadline in 3 days. Monica laughed. Beautiful. They're so focused. On fighting fires, they don't see the entire building about to go up in smoke. That night, I worked late reviewing everything I'd learned: the building's future, Henderson's vulnerabilities, and my options. By Thursday, I had missed 4 more calls from Henderson staff. My consulting proposal for the Mendelsohn Group had apparently worked. The client was satisfied. But new problems emerged. 2 other clients had raised concerns. The European deal was stalling. And still no word about the lease renewal. I spent the day visiting other properties in the area, getting a feel for the commercial real estate market firsthand. Rents were indeed increasing. Quality space in the West Loop commanded premium prices. Several property managers mentioned that demand far exceeded supply, especially for move-in-ready corporate suites. On my way home, I stopped at a small cafe I'd never noticed before, run by a woman who'd recently moved to Chicago from Portland. Her story of starting over, reinventing herself at 45, resonated with me. We talked for an hour about the challenges and freedoms of major life transitions. Sometimes, she said, we don't realize we've been living inside a box until something forces us out. Then we discovered the box was much smaller than the whole world. Friday morning arrived with an unexpected call from Robert Henderson. This time, his tone was different. Not asking for help, but delivering news. "I wanted to inform you personally," he began. "We've decided to reorganize our senior management. Patricia Wong will be stepping down as CFO." This was a shock. Patricia had been with the company for 8 years, was well respected, and hadn't shown any signs of professional weakness when I last saw her. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned. "It's not public yet, but the board feels we need fresh financial leadership, someone who can modernize our systems, streamline operations." He paused. "Actually, Sarah, this creates an interesting opportunity." My heart rate quickened. "Here it comes. We'd like to offer you the CFO position. You understand our business better than anyone, and your financial background is solid. The board specifically requested you." I stood in my kitchen, looking out at Lake Michigan, processing this massive shift in the conversation. "This is unexpected, Robert. I know it might seem strange after everything, but we've realized our mistake. You're the right person to help us through this transition." I thought about this carefully. CFO. Complete access to financial records, lease agreements, corporate planning. The irony was delicious, but the reality was more complex. What about Patricia? Is she leaving immediately? "She'll transition over. 2 weeks." "I see. Can I have the weekend to consider?" "Of course. But Sarah, we really need you. The company needs stability." After hanging up, I sat quietly for a long time. The offer was genuine. They truly believed they needed me. They also truly had forgotten about the lease renewal, which was due for discussion in exactly 4 business days. I called Monica with the update. "CFO? That's not just revenge. That's literary justice," she mused. "But think carefully. Taking that job changes the entire dynamic of your landlord position." She was right. As CFO, I'd have to disclose the conflict of interest. The whole beautiful irony would collapse into complex ethical and legal territory. That weekend, I took long walks along the lakefront, thinking about the strange turn my life had taken. A week ago, I was planning revenge through rent negotiations. Now I faced a choice between financial power and behind-the-scenes control. On Sunday evening, while reviewing all my options one more time, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wong. "I heard about your CFO offer. Can we meet for coffee Monday? There's something about the building lease you should know." Finally, someone remembered the renewal deadline. But why Patricia? Why not their real estate attorney or operations director? I replied, "Of course. What time works for you?" Her response came immediately. 10 a.m. at Cafe Luna, and Sarah. There's more to this story than you might think. More to the story? I thought I knew all the angles by now, but apparently the game was about to get even more interesting. Cafe Luna buzzed with Monday morning energy as I settled into a corner booth, nursing my first coffee of the day. Patricia Wong arrived exactly at 10, looking more exhausted than I'd seen her in the 8 years I'd known her. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and her usually immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of stress. A wrinkled blazer, hair pulled, back hastily. She ordered a large black coffee and sat down across from me, fidgeting with her phone before finally placing it face down on the table. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice low. "I'll get straight to the point because we don't have much time." "Regarding the building lease?" Her eyes widened slightly. "You know about the renewal deadline?" "I'm in real estate, Patricia." "I understand lease cycles," she nodded slowly. "Right. Of course. We've been so caught up in the operational chaos that the administration dropped the ball. But that's not why I'm here." Taking a long sip of coffee, she seemed to gather her courage. "I know about Aurora Holdings." The cafe noise faded into background static. I felt my heartbeat quicken, but maintained eye contact, waiting for her to continue. "My brother-in-law works for the county assessor's office. When I was reviewing our building expenses last month, I noticed discrepancies in the ownership records. Being a CFO, I dug deeper." She pulled a folder from her briefcase. It took me weeks, but I traced the shell companies. All roads lead back. To you. I remained silent, processing this revelation. The careful anonymity I'd maintained for nearly 7 years had just evaporated. Who else knows? No one. I haven't told Robert. I haven't told the board. She leaned forward. And that's the real reason I'm stepping down. Explain. When I discovered you owned our building, everything made sense. The immaculate maintenance, the fair rent, the timely responses to our requests. You were taking care of your own property while working inside it. But it also meant Robert fired his own landlord, and he's about to walk into a lease renewal negotiation with you. She slid the folder across the table. These are internal communications between Robert and the board about your termination. Things you need to see. I opened the folder, scanning through printed emails. The first one, dated 3 months ago. Confidential. Operation Refresh, board meeting minutes. The board agrees that our current management structure is too old guard for our growth plans. Target demographic analysis shows clients prefer younger, more dynamic leadership faces. Phase 1. Replace senior management positions with candidates under 40. I continued reading, my blood pressure rising with each document. Email chain. Robert Henderson to board chair. Sarah Johnson is our biggest obstacle. She has too much institutional knowledge and too much client loyalty. Need to remove her before implementing new AI-driven property management systems that will replace 40% of current staff. Patricia watched me read, her expression growing more uncomfortable. Keep going. It gets worse. Another email, just 2 weeks before my termination. The shareholders want increased profitability by Q4. Replacing senior staff with younger associates will cut labor costs by 28%. Sarah's salary alone could hire 3 junior analysts. Patrick will handle the messaging about fresh perspectives. I set the papers down, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside. This was never about innovation or fresh ideas. No, it was always about money and image. Patricia's voice carried genuine regret. I tried to argue against it. I pointed out that your client retention rate was 95%, that the junior staff relied on your mentorship. But the board had made up their minds. And you? Did you vote for this? I abstained. It was cowardly, I know, but I wasn't willing to sabotage my own position for a battle I knew I'd lose. She paused. I've regretted it every day since. I absorbed this information, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The careful orchestration of my firing, the public nature of it, the immediate replacement with someone younger. It had all been calculated. Why are you telling me this now? Because I found out what Robert plans to do about the lease renewal. Patricia's voice dropped even lower. He knows the deadline is approaching. He's not planning to pay market rate. Go on. He's preparing. A lowball offer, 10% below current rent. His argument will be that Henderson brings prestige to the building, that losing us would cost the landlord more than accepting reduced rent. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. And he has no idea who he's negotiating with. None. But here's the thing that made me come to you. Patricia hesitated, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Robert's planning to leverage the other tenants against the landlord. He's already approached 3 companies in the building, suggesting they form a tenant coalition to demand lower rents across the board. This was beyond anything I'd anticipated. Not only was he underestimating my position, but he was actively trying to organize a rent strike. What exactly did he tell them? That commercial rents in the building are above market average. That, if they band together, they can force the anonymous owner to reduce rates for everyone. He's positioning it as helping small businesses. I thought of Thomas Kim and his startup, Rebecca Torres from the marketing firm. Good people who might actually believe this narrative. Has anyone agreed? 3 so far. The law firm on 20 has some cash flow issues and jumped at the idea. The startup incubator on floors 6 and 7 is always looking to cut costs. And the accounting firm, but not everyone. No. Some tenants told him to handle his own negotiations. They're happy with their current arrangements. I processed this information, mentally calculating the impact of a coordinated rent reduction demand. It could destabilize the entire building's financial structure if not handled carefully. Is there something else? I sensed she was holding back. Patricia glanced around the cafe before pulling out her phone. This is why I really needed to meet you in person. She scrolled to a voice recording, pressing play. Robert's voice filled the small space between us. If the landlord won't negotiate on price, we'll make their life difficult. 2-year lease maximum, strict penalty clauses, public, complaints about building maintenance. The anonymous owners of these properties hate publicity. I held up my hand and she paused the recording. How did you get this? Board meeting 2 days ago. I'm recording everything now. She looked at me directly. There's more. Robert's been talking to developers. Apparently there's interest in acquiring buildings in this area for conversion to mixed-use developments. Higher profitability. The implications were clear. If he thought he could pressure the landlord into selling, he could potentially be part of that acquisition, except he was trying to pressure me into selling to myself. This is a lot to process, I said carefully. I know, and I want to apologize again for my role in your termination, for not speaking up, for failing to maintain the ethical standards I pride myself on. She paused. I'm stepping down not just because of the operational failures, but because I can't be part of what Robert's planning to do to you? We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of multiple revelations settling between us. What's your plan now? I asked. I'm considering private consulting. Some companies have already reached out. In fact, she pulled a business card from her wallet. I wanted to give you this, if you ever need financial consulting for other ventures. I took the card, noting the pre-printed name and number. You already had these made? I've been planning this exit for weeks. I just didn't expect to find out about Aurora Holdings before I left. My phone buzzed with a message. I glanced at it. Robert Henderson, asking for an update on my CFO decision. Patricia. Noticed. He's getting desperate about that position too. The external candidates he's interviewed have all turned him down after speaking with industry contacts. Word about how you were treated has spread more than he anticipated. And Jake Morrison, barely holding together. He's working 80-hour weeks trying to manage accounts he doesn't understand. 2 more clients have issued complaints this week. She shook her head. It's a textbook case of organizational collapse. But the board doesn't see it? The board sees what Robert shows them. Selective metrics, cherry-picked reports. They're getting frustrated with the results, but he's managed to deflect blame onto transition challenges. I thanked Patricia for her honesty and transparency. After she left, I sat in the cafe for another hour, rethinking every assumption I'd made about this situation. The elegant revenge I'd envisioned, simply raising rent or letting the lease lapse, seemed almost quaint now. Robert was planning a full assault on my property's profitability, using other tenants as unwitting weapons. But he had made a critical error. In his rush to consolidate power and cut costs, he had lost Patricia, the one person who might have discovered and explained the true ownership structure before negotiations began. I called Monica that afternoon and shared everything Patricia had revealed. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. This changes everything, she said finally. You're not just dealing with a lease renewal. You're dealing with potential business interference, tenant manipulation, and a CEO who's trying to corporate bully his own landlord. What would you do? Me? I'd fight fire with fire. But you're not me, and this isn't just business anymore. This is personal. They targeted you specifically, planned your downfall, and now they're trying to devalue your property. That evening, I contacted James Walsh at Premier Management Services. James, I need to accelerate some building improvements. Can you compile a list of necessary upgrades that would justify significant rent increases? Sure thing. Is this related to the Henderson renewal? Partly. But I'm also thinking about the bigger picture. This building needs to become the premium address in the West Loop. Spare no expense. Understood. I'll have proposals by Wednesday. Also, I want detailed reports on every tenant's payment history, lease terms, and any communications with Henderson and Associates in the last month. That's unusual, but I'll prepare everything. On Tuesday morning, I received an unexpected visitor. David, my former assistant, rang my apartment intercom at 7 a.m. I know this is early, he said as I buzzed him up. But I had to tell you before I went into the office. They're panicking about the lease renewal. Patricia's resignation left a huge gap, and Robert doesn't know what to do. David handed me a coffee from my favorite shop. Yesterday afternoon, he tried to get me to find the building owner's contact information, wanted to reach out personally. What? Did you tell him? That it would be handled through proper channels. He grinned. I may have mentioned that rushing into negotiations might not be wise. Good advice. Sarah, there's something else. Jake's made another major error. He approved a building alteration for a client without checking the lease terms. The property owner is threatening legal action. My property. My lease terms. My building was being altered without my permission. What kind of alteration? They installed a communications array on the roof of their leased space. Apparently it requires owner approval, which they don't have. I thanked David and immediately called James Walsh. Unauthorized roof installation on the Meridian Tower software suite? I asked. Yes, we caught it during our routine quarterly inspection. We're in the process of issuing formal notices. Has Henderson and Associates been notified they approved an invalid alteration? We informed their legal department yesterday. They seemed surprised. I spent the rest of Tuesday coordinating responses. The building's management company prepared a formal notice about the unauthorized modification. I also had them prepare documentation of Henderson's lease terms, highlighting clauses about unauthorized subletting and property modifications that I suspected were also being violated. By Wednesday, James Walsh delivered his proposal for building upgrades. The scope was impressive: complete lobby renovation, elevator cab upgrades, enhanced security systems, energy-efficient lighting throughout common areas, and modernization of the building's mechanical systems. Total cost, $2.3 million estimated. Increase in building value, $8.5 million. Projected return on investment, 18 months. But more importantly, the improvements would justify a 22% increase in rent across all tenants, per market analysis. That afternoon, I received a call from Thomas Kim, whose startup was expanding. He sounded frustrated. Ms. Johnson? I hope you don't mind the call. Robert Henderson suggested we talk about building rent negotiations. What specifically did he suggest? He's organizing tenants to demand lower rents, says the building is overpriced, but honestly, I've been researching comparable properties. We're paying below market already. This confirmed what Patricia had told me. Robert was actively misleading tenants about market rates. What's your take on it? I asked. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds us. This building is perfect for our needs. We're actually looking to expand, not complain about costs. We talked for 15 minutes. Thomas mentioned that several tenants were uncomfortable with Henderson's aggressive approach, but were afraid to speak up. That evening, I drafted 2 letters. The first was to Henderson and Associates. Notice of lease renewal requirements and outstanding violations. This letter serves as formal notice regarding your lease renewal, due for negotiation by date. Please be advised that the following items require immediate attention. Unauthorized roof installation requiring immediate removal. Documentation of subleasing arrangements requiring owner approval. Evidence of compliance with noise ordinances, multiple tenant complaints, 4. Current market rent adjustments based on building improvements. A complete review meeting is scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. with building management. Attendance by company authorized representatives is mandatory. The second letter was to Robert Henderson personally. Regarding your persistent contact attempts, I want you to understand that your actions have consequences beyond immediate business operations. Your strategies regarding tenant relations and property negotiations have been noted by all relevant parties. Consider this a final courtesy before decisions become irrevocable. A friend of ethical business practices. I didn't sign it, but ensured. It would be delivered through a courier service, maintaining the mystery while sending a clear message. Thursday brought unexpected developments. Patricia called me, her voice tight with concern. Sarah, Roberts hired a private investigator. He's determined to identify the building owner before the renewal negotiation. What exactly is he investigating? Property records, corporate filings, anything that might reveal identity. He's convinced there's a local investor he can pressure or negotiate with directly. How do you know this? His secretary is my cousin. She overheard him on the phone with the investigator yesterday. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Robert deployed an investigator to find an anonymous landlord, his former CFO was feeding that very landlord inside information. There's something else, Patricia continued. Jake Morrison is having a breakdown. Yesterday, he locked himself in a conference room for 4 hours. HR had to call his emergency contact. What happened? The Mendelsohn Group, the major client you helped retain? They've sent a formal complaint directly to the board. Apparently, Jake tried to implement changes to their account that contradicted your consultation recommendations. The House of Cards was falling faster than anyone anticipated. Friday morning arrived with Chicago's typical March unpredictability. Snow flurries one moment, bright sun the next. I dressed meticulously for my 2 p.m. meeting with Henderson's representative, knowing this would be the moment everything changed. I arrived at the building's conference room early, allowing time to arrange documents and prepare mentally. The room overlooked the financial district, providing a perfect view of the city's commercial heart. At 1:55, James Walsh arrived to provide last-minute updates. 3 unauthorized renovations had been discovered in Henderson's space. The tenant coalition had dissolved after 2 companies independently verified that their current rents were actually below market. At 2 sharp, the door opened, but instead of a legal representative or office manager, Robert Henderson himself walked in. He froze when he saw me sitting at the head of the conference table. Sarah? What are you doing here? I gestured to the chair across from me. Please, have a seat. We have quite a bit to discuss. Robert's face cycled through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, dawning horror. He remained standing for a moment, his hand still on the door handle, before slowly closing it and taking the offered seat. I don't understand, he said, though his voice suggested he was beginning to piece things together. This is a tenant negotiation meeting. Why would you be here? I slid the Aurora Holdings Incorporation documents across the table, followed by the property deed for 425 West Harrison Street. His eyes scanned the papers, his skin growing paler with each page turned. These documents confirm that Aurora Holdings LLC, the owner of this building, has been under my control since 2018. You've been my tenant for 5 years, Robert. He looked up from the papers, his professional composure cracking. That's impossible. We did background checks when we leased this space. There was no connection to you. I established multiple shell companies and trusts specifically to maintain anonymity. Neural Path Holdings, Eastern Bay Ventures. They all ultimately answered to me. Your background checks weren't thorough enough. Robert's hands trembled slightly as he set down the documents. So when you walked into that conference room last week to fire me, I walked into my own building to fire my own tenant. Yes. The silence stretched between us, heavy with irony and disbelief. Finally, Robert found his voice again. Is this some kind of elaborate revenge? Because I understand you're upset about— Upset? I interrupted, pulling Patricia's folder from my briefcase. Let me share something with you. I spread the internal communications across the table. The emails about Operation Refresh, the cold calculations about replacing senior staff with cheaper labor, the deliberate age discrimination that had targeted not just me, but 3 other senior employees. These were never about fresh perspectives or innovation. This was about cutting costs and playing to stereotypes about youth in business. I tapped one particular email. You specifically wrote that my institutional knowledge was a liability because it made me harder to replace. Robert's face flushed, red as he read his own words. Those emails were taken out of context. The board was pressuring us to increase margins by discriminating based on age, by publicly humiliating experienced employees, by assuming that youth equals competence. I leaned forward. You violated both federal employment law and the ethical standards you claim to uphold. We followed all legal protocols. HR approved everything. Legal doesn't mean ethical, Robert, and considering I now have access to internal documents that show you manipulated HR recommendations, I pulled out another set of papers. Michael Stevens wasn't comfortable with the terminations. You pressured him by threatening to reduce his department's budget. The color drained from his face again. How do you have all this? Turns out, when you create a toxic work environment, people start documenting everything to protect themselves. I gestured to the chair he was sitting in. Speaking of protection, shall we discuss your lease renewal? Robert's jaw tightened. Given this situation, I think it's clear there's a conflict of interest. We'll be consulting with legal counsel. About options. Please do. I opened my laptop and displayed a spreadsheet. But first, let's review your current standing as a tenant. The spreadsheet detailed every lease violation Henderson and Associates had committed in the past year. Unauthorized modifications, subletting violations, late payments disguised as processing delays, and complaints from other tenants about noise, and common area usage. Your current lease expires in 4 days. Per the agreement, any renewal requires both parties to act in good faith. Your recent actions suggest otherwise. What actions? Attempting to organize a tenant revolt based on false information about current market rates. Threatening to damage the building's reputation through negative publicity. Hiring a private investigator to identify and intimidate the property owner. Robert shifted uncomfortably. That's standard business practice. Nothing about your behavior has been standard, Robert. I closed the laptop. Here's where we stand. You need this space. Your entire operation is configured around this layout. Moving would cost you millions in downtime and reconstruction. Could see him calculating behind his eyes. Are you saying you won't renew our lease? I'm saying the terms have changed. Let me outline your options. I slid a new contract across the table. Option 1. Sign this renewal at current market rate, a 15% increase from your existing rent. All lease violations are forgiven. You maintain your current space with a 5-year commitment. He scanned the document, his frown deepening. This would add nearly $700,000 annually to our occupancy costs, which is still below market rate for comparable space in this area. But there's more. I placed a second document beside the first. Option 2. I'm preparing to completely renovate this building. New lobby, upgraded elevators, enhanced security, modern HVAC systems. These improvements will increase property values by approximately 30%. Which means your rent would increase by 25% now, with another 10% increase upon renovation completion. However, your lease would be month to month until renovations are complete. His hands clenched into fists. You can't do this. This is extortion. This is business, Robert. The same kind of business calculation you made when you decided I was too expensive to keep. I leaned back in my chair. Of course, there is a third option. Which is? You resign from Henderson and Associates within 30 days. I will personally ensure the company receives a generous renewal package at current rates, plus assistance with the transition to new leadership. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. Robert stared at the documents, then at me, then back at the documents. You planned this, he said quietly. All of it. The way you've handled everything since being fired. I didn't plan to be a private investigator. I didn't plan to organize tenants against me. I certainly didn't plan the multiple lease violations. Your company has committed. I gathered the papers into neat stacks. What I planned was to observe how your business operated when you thought no one was watching. And now? Now I've seen enough. Your company culture under your leadership creates problems that can't be sustained. Your treatment of experienced employees has damaged your ability to retain talent. Your financial management, as evidenced by Patricia's resignation and Jake's failures, needs complete restructuring. Robert stood abruptly, pacing to the window. This is insane. I built this company from nothing. I created jobs for hundreds of people. And I built this building when this area was still rough around the edges. I took risks, invested millions, and maintained it impeccably. I remained seated, watching him. Your company operates in my building because I created that opportunity. You seem to have forgotten that business relationships are two-way streets. He turned back to face me. Patricia, told you. That's how you know about internal communications. Patricia followed her conscience. Something you might consider. What about the CFO position? Was that all part of your game? No game, Robert. That was a genuine offer, made in desperation, because your organization is failing. Did you really think I wouldn't notice client defections, staff turnover, and operational breakdowns? He slumped back into the chair. What do you want from me? I want you to understand the consequences. When you fire someone publicly, claiming they're outdated, you risk discovering they were never as powerless as you assumed. I tapped the stack of documents. When you systematically discriminate, you create legal liabilities. When you try to bully your way through business negotiations, you might be bullying the wrong person. Robert buried his face in his hands. The board will never accept my resignation. I'm the founder. The board might be more receptive than you think. I opened my laptop again, displaying a new document. I've prepared a detailed report on Henderson and Associates' performance over the past year. Client retention, staff turnover, financial projections, and legal risks. You wouldn't? I would, and I will if necessary. But I'm offering you a choice. Resign gracefully, and I'll ensure the building management works closely with new leadership to create a sustainable occupancy arrangement. And if I refuse, then Henderson and Associates will face month-to-month tenancy with market rate increases, continued scrutiny for lease violations, and potential legal challenges for the discrimination practices I documented. The weight of his situation seemed to finally settle on his shoulders. You've checked me. I've responded to your actions with business consequences. Nothing more, nothing less. He picked up the resignation option document, reading it slowly. If I sign this, what happens to me? That's up to you. I understand you have considerable stock in the company. A managed departure could preserve most of your equity value. Fight this, and the company's declining performance will diminish that value significantly. I need time to think. You have until closing business on Monday. The renovation plan begins Tuesday, regardless of your decision. Robert gathered the documents, his movements stiff and uncertain. At the door, he paused without turning back. I still believe my decisions were right for the company. Then perhaps you should experience being on the receiving end of such decisions. After he left, I sat in the empty conference room looking out at the city skyline. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the confrontation began to ebb, replaced by a strange mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. My phone buzzed with a message from Monica. How did it go? Coffee in an hour? I responded. It went. Yes, to coffee. For the next hour, I documented everything that had transpired, creating a detailed record of the meeting, Robert's responses, and the options presented. Legal protocol might be necessary if he chose to fight. At the coffee shop, Monica was already waiting with my usual order. "You look like you just ended a war," she observed. "Something like that." I described the meeting in detail, watching her. Expressions shift from amusement to impressed nodding. Option 3 was brilliant. Offering him a face-saving exit while ensuring you maintain control of the situation. I don't want to destroy his career. I just want him to understand respect and consequences. And he will. Men like Robert rarely encounter real accountability. They operate in bubbles where their decisions affect others, but rarely themselves. We spent the afternoon discussing implications and next steps. If Robert resigned, I'd need strategies for working with Henderson's new leadership. If he fought, I'd need to prepare for potential legal challenges while proceeding with the building renovation. That evening, I received an unexpected message from Jake Morrison. "Dr. Johnson, I know I have no right to ask, but could we please talk? I'm failing, and I need guidance." I agreed to meet him the following day, curious about his perspective on recent events. Saturday morning brought March's version of spring to Chicago, almost warm enough to believe winter was truly ending. Jake Morrison looked haggard as he sat across from me at a small cafe in River North. "I don't even know where to start," he began, his usual confidence completely absent. "Everything's falling apart, and I'm drowning." "Tell me about the Mendelssohn situation." I thought I understood the account structure, but there were layers of complexity you'd built over years. Client relationships, customized reporting systems, personal connections that couldn't be replicated by reading files. And the European deal? "We lost it yesterday. They cited concerns about leadership stability and account management consistency." He paused. "They specifically mentioned your departure as a red flag." What does Robert say about these losses? He's blaming the transition period. Says once we implement new systems, everything will improve. But nobody believes that anymore. Jake shared details about internal chaos I hadn't witnessed directly. Senior clients requesting account reassignments, staff morale plummeting, strategic initiatives abandoned for crisis management. "The CFO offered him," Jake continued. "The board actually demanded it. 3 directors threatened to resign if he didn't bring back experienced leadership." This was revealing. The board was applying pressure I hadn't fully appreciated. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Because I've been part of something wrong," he admitted. "I was recruited specifically to replace senior staff. They told me it was about innovation, but it was really about cost-cutting and age discrimination. And now? Now I see the value of experience I was too arrogant to recognize before." He met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry for my role in this." Sunday passed quietly. I spent the day reviewing financial projections for the building, considering various scenarios based on Robert's potential decisions. By evening, I'd developed contingency plans for each possible outcome. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth. I was reviewing documentation when my phone rang. James Walsh, the property manager. "Aurora Holdings. We have a situation. Robert Henderson is here requesting an emergency meeting with the owner. Send him to the conference room. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I arrived, Robert was sitting in the same chair as Friday, but his demeanor had changed completely. He looked up as I entered, a resignation letter visible on the table before him. "I'll sign it," he said without preamble. "But I want something in return." "Which is?" "I want you to work with the company during the transition. 2 months. Not as CFO, but as a strategic consultant. Help maintain client relationships and train new leadership." I considered this carefully. It would mean direct professional contact with people who'd terminated my employment. It would also mean ensuring Henderson and Associates, and by extension, my building's major tenant, successfully navigated this crisis. Under specific conditions, I replied. My consulting rate is triple my former salary. Full autonomy in recommending organizational changes. And a public statement from you taking responsibility for the discrimination practices. Will you torpedo the company if I refuse? The company will torpedo itself. I'm offering you a way to save it. I pulled out the prepared strategic recovery plan Monica and I had developed. With proper leadership and restructuring, Henderson and Associates can not only survive but thrive. Without it, I let the implication hang in the air. Robert picked up his pen, signing the resignation letter with a shaking hand. When do we start? Tomorrow. And Robert? I waited until he met my eyes. This isn't victory for me or defeat for you. This is business finding its proper equilibrium. As he left, I realized something profound had shifted. The anger and humiliation from my termination had transformed into something more powerful. The satisfaction of turning a personal attack into a professional lesson. The next morning, I walked through the lobby of 425 West Harrison Street with an entirely new perspective. I was no longer an employee or a hidden owner. I was a strategic consultant working to stabilize operations in my own building. Patricia Wong was waiting in the lobby, a small smile on her face. I heard about your consulting agreement. Ready to save the company that fired you? Ready to save? A valuable tenant's business. There's a difference. As we rode the elevator to the 15th floor, I noticed Frank the security guard watching us with knowing eyes. Had he figured it out too? The elevator doors opened to a staff gathering. Jennifer at reception looked startled, then relieved to see me. Dr. Johnson, we're so glad you're back. Just helping with the transition, I clarified. David appeared. From around the corner, professional relief written across his face. The client calls have been challenging. They'll be glad to hear your consulting. I spent that first day in a familiar office, not my old one, but a conference room that had been converted into a temporary workspace. My first task was reviewing a complete operational assessment of Henderson and Associates as it existed in this post-Robert era. The numbers were stark. Client retention had dropped 23% in 5 days. 2 more senior staff had submitted resignations. The company's revenue projections had fallen by 35%. Without intervention, Henderson and Associates would face serious viability challenges within months. By afternoon, I met with the interim leadership team, department heads who had stepped into Robert's vacuum. They were divided between maintaining his vision and abandoning his methods. We need stability, said Marcus Chen, head of operations. Clients are scared. Staff is demoralized. What's the biggest immediate challenge? I asked. The Morrison Project, replied Janet Burke, now interim CEO. It's worth $12 million, but Jake's management has put it at risk. Morrison wants assurance we can deliver. I reviewed the Morrison file, finding issues that were fixable but required immediate attention. Schedule a face-to-face with Morrison for Wednesday. I'll handle the presentation. Over the following days, a remarkable thing happened. The company that had dismissed me for being outdated began implementing strategies that relied heavily on experience and institutional knowledge. We restructured account management to pair junior and senior staff, created mentorship programs, and established quality control processes that prevented the errors that had plagued recent months. By the end of my first week as a consultant, we had stabilized the Morrison account, retained 3 major clients who had been preparing to leave, and established a new leadership structure that balanced innovation with experience. The transformation was noticeable even in small ways. Staff. Meetings that had become tense problem sessions evolved into collaborative solution-finding exercises. The company culture began shifting from competitive cost-cutting to cooperative value creation. On Friday, I held my first all-hands meeting as a consultant. The conference room was packed with employees, many of whom had watched my public termination weeks earlier. I'm here to help navigate a transition period, I began. not to settle scores or assign blame. The focus is moving forward. Someone near the back raised a hand. How do we know things will really change? Change requires more than new leadership, I replied. It requires acknowledging what went wrong and committing to different choices. Your executive team has committed to age-diverse hiring, performance-based evaluation, and operational transparency. Whether those commitments are kept will be evident in actions, not words. After the meeting, several employees approached me privately. Some apologized for not speaking up during my termination. Others asked for career guidance. It was clear. The recent events had prompted significant self-reflection throughout the organization. 2 weeks into my consulting role, I received an invitation to meet with the building's other tenants. Thomas Kim had organized a gathering to discuss the attempted rent negotiation and its aftermath. In a community room I had previously only seen in passing, representatives from 8 of the 10 tenant companies had assembled. The atmosphere was curious rather than confrontational. "We wanted to thank you," Rebecca Torres began, "for not penalizing us for Henderson's actions." "And apologize," added the representative from the law firm that had initially supported Robert's rent reduction scheme. "We were given incomplete information about market rates. I learned that Robert's private investigator had been asking these same people questions about the building owner. No one had any useful information to provide, but the approach had alienated several tenants who valued the current management. Actually," Thomas continued, "we've been discussing forming a proper tenant association, not for negotiating rents, but for improving communication with building management and organizing community events." It was exactly the kind of positive tenant relationship that created long-term building value, something Robert's scorched earth approach would have destroyed. By the end of March, Henderson and Associates showing signs of genuine recovery. Retention had stabilized. The company had hired 3 experienced professionals to balance their younger staff. Most significantly, the toxic culture that had prioritized image over substance was being replaced by one that valued diverse contributions. I maintained my role as strategic consultant, but reduced my hours as the company found its footing. This gave me time to focus on building improvements, which were proceeding ahead of schedule. One morning in early April, while reviewing renovation progress in the lobby, I encountered David running errands for the office. "Dr. Johnson? Sarah?" He smiled. "This is weird, isn't it? Seeing you here again, but everything being different?" "It's definitely different. How are you adjusting?" "Honestly, the office feels more professional now, like we're focusing on actual work instead of politics and image management." He paused. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. How are you handling all this? Being back, but not back? Working with people who treated you so badly?" I considered his question carefully. I've learned that holding on to anger takes more energy than moving forward with purpose. What happened was wrong, but fixing it requires more than revenge. It requires rebuilding. The entrance doors opened, and Jake Morrison entered, carrying client files and looking focused rather than frantic. He nodded professionally as he passed, a far cry from the arrogant young MBA who had initially replaced me. "Even Jake seems different," David observed. "People can grow when circumstances require it. Sometimes it just takes a significant wake-up call." April passed quickly, marked by steady improvements in company performance and building operations. I established a routine that split time between consulting work and property management, finding unexpected synergy between the roles. Early May brought the first tenant association meeting in the renovated community room. The gathering included not just tenant representatives, but also building management, creating a collaborative atmosphere I hadn't seen in years of working in the building. During this meeting, Thomas Kim made an announcement that caught everyone by surprise. "Some of us have been discussing the positive changes we've seen in building management over the past months. We'd like to formally recognize the owner of this property for maintaining such professional standards. He produced a plaque recognizing exceptional property ownership and handed it to James Walsh to forward to Aurora Holdings, LLC. Standing. In the back of the room, I felt an unusual moment of public appreciation, not as Sarah Johnson, the fired employee, or even Sarah the consultant, but as the property owner who had maintained space for 250 professionals to pursue their careers. That evening, in a quiet moment at home, I called Patricia to share the day's events. "A plaque from tenants? That's wonderfully ironic," she said, laughing. "From secret owner to appreciate landlord. It feels like things are finding their proper balance." Speaking of balance, I've been meaning to ask, what are your long-term plans? You can't really continue consulting for Henderson indefinitely. She was right. The company was stabilized, leadership was functioning, and my presence was becoming more maintenance than necessity. "I've been thinking about that. There's a certain symmetry to wrapping up at the end of May. 3 months of consulting to undo years of poor leadership choices? Something like that. In the final weeks of May, I prepared for transition out of the consulting role. Henderson and Associates was not just surviving, but showing promising growth indicators. Client relationships had strengthened, new business was materializing, and the company's culture increasingly reflected the value-based, rather than image-based approach. On my last official day as a consultant, the company held a simple ceremony. Janet Burke, who had successfully transitioned from interim to permanent CEO, presented me with a company pin, the same one I had been asked to return when terminated. "We wanted to restore this to you," she said, "as a symbol of what you've always been, a valued contributor to this organization." I accepted it, noting the irony that it took my termination and hidden ownership to fully demonstrate my value to the company. After the ceremony, I had one final task. I met with the building's board of directors, not Henderson's board, but the building management committee I had established back when I first bought the property. "The building has exceeded our profitability targets," James Walsh reported. "Occupancy remains at 98%, with waiting lists for premium spaces. The tenant association has created positive community dynamics that protect our competitive advantages." As the meeting concluded, I made a decision that had been forming over the previous weeks. I want to establish a continuing education program for commercial real estate professionals, something that brings together younger talent with experienced practitioners. The board members exchanged glances. "Based on what we've observed in recent months?" one asked. "Exactly. Too many companies undervalue experience while overvaluing youth. Both perspectives are essential for sustainable success." By early June, plans were underway for what would become the Chicago Commercial Real Estate Mentorship Foundation, headquartered in my building and offering programs that connected industry veterans with emerging professionals. The irony of this development couldn't be ignored. Henderson and Associates would likely become participants in a program created by the woman they had fired for being too old. The final chapter of this particular story came full circle in an unexpected way. In late June, I attended an industry conference, the same annual event where I had been terminated months earlier. As an Aurora Holdings representative, I was presenting on sustainable property management practices. The presentation room was packed, with attendees representing companies from across the Midwest. As I began speaking, I noticed Robert Henderson in the back row. He was no longer CEO but remained a shareholder and industry consultant. Our eyes met briefly across the room. In his expression, I saw not enmity but something resembling respect, perhaps even understanding. After my presentation, during the networking session, he approached carefully. "Sarah, your program is getting attention throughout the industry. Several firms are already implementing similar approaches to managing experience in their workforce. That's gratifying to hear. I wanted you to know." He paused, choosing words carefully. "What happened to you was wrong. I've spent the last few months really understanding that. Understanding is the first step toward improvement." Indeed, He extended his hand. "I hope you find genuine success in everything you're building." I shook his hand, realizing that this gesture held more meaning than any apology could have carried. Success has proven to be the most effective response to discrimination. As the conference wound down, I found myself back in the lobby where my professional crisis had begun. The marble floors gleamed just as brilliantly. The chandelier cast the same shadows. But I walked through as a different person entirely. My phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "Building renovations complete ahead of schedule and under budget. Ready to celebrate your empire?" I smiled, responding, "Ready to celebrate new beginnings." The last 6 months had transformed more than just my career trajectory or financial circumstances. They had revealed something essential about power, respect, and the true nature of professional relationships. Being fired had forced me to discover capabilities I had never fully explored while safely employed. That evening, as I watched the sunset from my apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, I reflected on the strange journey that had begun with humiliation in a conference room and led to owning the very space where that humiliation occurred. The building lights of downtown Chicago sparkled in the gathering darkness, each window representing someone working late, building careers, pursuing ambitions. Somewhere in that landscape, former colleagues continued at Henderson and Associates under new leadership. The company had survived its crisis and emerged more ethical, if less arrogant. And I had transformed from a victim of corporate politics into an active shaper of business culture, all because someone had underestimated the power of hidden positions and patient planning. As always in real life, no situation concludes with perfect satisfaction. But sometimes, just sometimes, the arc of justice bends in exactly the right direction, at exactly the right moment. September brought Chicago's golden autumn to the city, painting the skyline in warm hues that matched my mood as I walked through the completed lobby renovation of 425 West Harrison Street. The transformation exceeded even Monica's optimistic projections. Modern art installations, energy-efficient lighting, and a digital concierge system that several other downtown properties were now emulating. "The September occupancy report," James Walsh said, handing me a leather folder. 99.2%. We have companies on waiting list for the first time in the building's history. I reviewed the numbers while sipping coffee in the newly redesigned community room. Henderson and Associates had renewed their lease. At full market rate, their financial recovery making the payment affordable again. More importantly, their culture transformation had attracted 3 major clients, who specifically cited their balanced approach to experience and innovation. "Any updates on the Mentorship Foundation applicants?" I asked. 53 applications this month alone. We're scheduling interviews for the inaugural class, including, he paused with a knowing smile, 3 from Henderson and Associates. The Chicago Commercial Real Estate Mentorship Foundation had exceeded all expectations. What started as a response to age discrimination had evolved into a model program that industries beyond real estate were studying. Harvard Business School had requested permission to develop a case study. My phone rang with a familiar number. "Patricia Wong. Quick question," she said without preamble. "Would you consider speaking at the Midwest Women in Business Conference next month? The board specifically requested you to address overcoming professional setbacks." "How specific?" "Should I be about my particular setback?" She laughed. "As specific as you're comfortable with, though I hear the rumors have made their way through the industry grapevine. Everyone knows about the secret landlord situation now." The open secret had indeed spread throughout Chicago's business community. Rather than hiding it, I'd decided to own the narrative. In a recent interview with Crain's Chicago Business, I'd discussed the experience openly, using it to highlight systemic issues in corporate America. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my building office. Frank, the security guard, knocked hesitantly on my open door. "Ms. Johnson, could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Frank. Please come in." He remained standing, hat in hands, I wanted to thank you personally. My daughter just started in the Foundation's mentorship program. At 52, she thought. Her career in commercial development was over. This program gave her hope. The conversation reminded me why I'd created the Foundation, not for revenge, but for systemic change. October marked the Foundation's first Success Summit, a networking event showcasing participants' achievements. The renovated community room hosted 60 professionals, ranging from recent graduates to industry veterans with decades of experience. Among the attendees was Jake Morrison, now working with his assigned mentor, a 60-year-old property development expert who had previously considered early retirement. Together, they'd secured 2 major deals by combining Jake's technological expertise with his mentor's relationship network. During the cocktail reception, I overheard their conversation. The biggest lesson, the mentor was saying, is understanding that digital tools are powerful, but relationships are irreplaceable. You can't automate trust. Jake nodded enthusiastically. And I've learned that patterns in property cycles that seem obvious now were invisible without historical context. Your 40 years of experience showed me what to look for. These interactions validated everything I'd hoped to achieve. The Foundation wasn't just providing mentorship. It was demonstrating collaborative models that entire industries could adopt. Later that evening, Monica joined me for a late dinner, reviewing our expanded business plans. I have a proposition, she said over wine. 3 other Chicago property owners want to replicate your tenant association model. They're offering partnership opportunities. Partnership in what context? A property management consulting firm. You'd train building owners on creating value through community building rather than just asset management. The idea intrigued me. My experience with Aurora Holdings had revealed that successful property ownership required more than collecting rent. It required ecosystem thinking. What's the scope? Initially, 4 premier properties, but I've had inquiries from owners in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Detroit. This could scale nationally. November brought unexpected closure to lingering concerns. I received a letter from the EEOC stating their investigation had concluded with official findings that Henderson and Associates had engaged in age-based discrimination. The company was required to implement comprehensive training programs and diversity metrics. More significantly, the case became a landmark example cited in new federal guidelines for age discrimination prevention. Personal injustice had contributed to systemic change. 3 days after receiving this news, I got a call from Janet Burke at Henderson and Associates. Sarah, I wanted to inform you first. We've been selected for the Chicago Chamber of Commerce Excellence in Business Ethics Award. The presentation committee specifically cited our transformation and the mentorship initiatives we've adopted. The irony was complete. The company that fired me for age discrimination was being honored for ethical business practices that directly resulted from that discriminatory action. December brought Chicago's first significant snowfall, transforming the city into a winter wonderland. From my office window, I watched employees from various building tenants creating impromptu snowmen in the courtyard during lunch breaks. This year-end period also marked completion of our building's environmental sustainability certification, the first in the West Loop district. The renovations had improved energy efficiency by 37%, reduced water consumption by 28%, and earned LEED Platinum status. The certification celebration brought together all tenants, creating genuine community that transcended business relationships. I watched former adversaries collaborating on green initiatives, young professionals seeking wisdom from experienced colleagues, and a building culture that emphasized cooperation over competition. Thomas Kim approached during the celebration. Your influence has extended beyond just property management. Our startup's internal culture shifted after participating in the Foundation seminars. We've hired 3 professionals over 45 and found their oversight prevents many costly mistakes our young team would have made. These anecdotal successes multiplied across participants. The Foundation received calls from companies reporting improved retention, increased innovation through diverse perspectives, and stronger client relationships, when teams included varied age demographics. On the anniversary of my termination, a date I'd once thought would bring bitter memories, I instead found myself at a podium in Northwestern University's business school, delivering the endowed lecture I'd established. The annual Experience and Innovation lecture series brought together corporate leaders to discuss sustainable business practices that valued all demographics. This year's theme, Hidden Power, Understanding Organizational Blind Spots. As I looked out at the auditorium, I noticed Robert Henderson in the third row. His presence no longer carried the weight of conflict. He'd become a champion for age diversity, speaking at conferences about his own learning experience. During the networking afterwards, he approached carefully, as had become our custom. "Your latest initiatives are reshaping how businesses think about human capital," he said. "I've been implementing your frameworks in my consulting work." Frameworks. Derived from a crisis you created, I reminded him with gentle irony. Sometimes the best systems emerge from addressing our worst failures. He paused. "I hope you know that experience taught me more than any MBA course ever did." The conversation felt like closing a circle, not with reconciliation that erased history, but with growth that acknowledged it. January arrived with ambitious expansion plans. The property management consulting venture had confirmed partnerships with 12 buildings across 5 cities. The Mentorship Foundation was licensing its curriculum to corporations for internal programs. More personally, I'd received offers to join 3 corporate boards, not as replacements, but as experienced additions to teams that understood value in diverse perspectives. At a board meeting for a Fortune 500 client, the conversation turned to workforce planning. The CEO, a dynamic woman in her 40s, expressed concern about their aging executive team. "Traditional thinking suggests we need younger leaders," she mused, "but I'm questioning that assumption." I shared metrics from our foundation research. Companies with age-diverse leadership boards showed 23% better long-term performance, 31% improved crisis management, and 42% higher employee satisfaction. "The question isn't young versus old," I explained. "It's about creating systems where different perspectives enhance rather than compete with each other." This consulting work felt like contributing to cultural evolution rather than just business success. Each conversation moved industries closer to recognizing experience as an asset rather than a liability. February marked another milestone, the Foundation's first international partnership. A Singapore-based organization requested licensing to adapt our programs for Asia's rapidly aging workforce. The global implications of our local experiment surprised even me. I spent considerable time developing cultural adaptations while maintaining core principles. The challenge reinforced lessons from my own experience. Solutions require both universal principles and contextual understanding. During video conferences with our Singapore partners, I often reflected on how a single discriminatory decision had rippled across oceans, creating frameworks for global change. March brought full-circle moments that seemed scripted by fate itself. The Tech Vision Conference, where I'd been publicly terminated, invited me as the keynote speaker for their upcoming event. The speaking committee, unknowingly including the same moderator who'd presided over my humiliation, framed the invitation around innovative approaches to organizational culture. I accepted, planning to use the platform to address age discrimination directly rather than obliquely. Standing on that same stage in April, I spoke not with bitterness, but with evidence-based confidence. The presentation showcased quantitative results from companies implementing age-diverse practices, including Henderson & Associates' remarkable turnaround. "Last year on this stage," I said during my opening, "I was told I was outdated, unable to keep pace with innovation. Today, I stand here representing frameworks that 20 Fortune 500 companies have adopted to enhance their innovation capacity." The audience's attention sharpened as they connected these dots. "The irony of age discrimination in technology," I continued, is that longevity itself requires sustained innovation. Systems endure through adaptation, not replacement. The response was immediate and powerful. 3 standing ovations punctuated a presentation that challenged fundamental assumptions about workplace value systems. Afterwards, the conference organizer approached with genuine contrition. We had no idea about the circumstances of last year. After today, we want to establish a permanent series on workplace equity, with you as the founding speaker. The transformation felt complete, from victim to architect of industry change. May's arrival brought reflection as I prepared to transition the foundation to broader leadership. After 18 months, the organization had evolved beyond needing my direct oversight. A board of accomplished professionals, half over 45 and half under 35, would continue its mission. At the transition ceremony, I addressed participants one final time as executive director. This foundation began as a response to personal injustice. It endures as a bridge between expertise and opportunity. Your collective success proves that talent has no expiration date. The ceremony concluded with an announcement that caught me by surprise. The board had voted to establish the Sarah Johnson Innovation in Ethics Award, recognizing companies that turned internal failures into systemic improvements. June marked a year since I'd owned the reveal of my building ownership. To commemorate, I organized the first annual Aurora Holdings Community Gala. The event, hosted in our building's completely renovated ballroom, brought together all stakeholders: tenants, employees, community leaders, and business partners. The evening celebrated not just building success but the emergence of new business paradigms. 5 companies presented case studies showing how age-diverse teams had solved complex challenges, including breakthroughs in sustainable energy systems and innovative healthcare delivery models. Janet Burke, representing Henderson and Associates, shared the stage with me for a panel discussion. As we talked about organizational transformation, the complete journey became visible. From hostile termination to philosophical alliance, from hidden ownership to transparent partnership. The hardest lesson, she reflected, was unlearning the belief that change always comes from youth. We discovered that sustainable innovation requires both fresh ideas and deep wisdom. The audience response validated why this experience had resonated beyond Chicago. Thousands of professionals had encountered similar challenges, and our public example provided both validation and practical solutions. July brought international recognition. The Harvard Business Review published a comprehensive case study titled "The Aurora Effect: How One Woman's Response to Discrimination Created Industry-Wide Change." The article traced systemic impacts, legislative references to our EEOC case, adoption of mentorship models by the Small Business Administration, and policy changes in Fortune 500 companies. Personal justice had catalyzed social evolution. Simultaneously, academic institutions integrated our story into business ethics curricula. Stanford's Business School developed an entire course around ethical response to corporate injustice, using our case as the foundation example. August hosted the foundation's 2-year anniversary celebration. The growth statistics revealed remarkable impact: over 500 successful mentor-mentee partnerships, 47 policy changes in participating companies, and measurable economic impact exceeding $50 million in preventing talent loss. Most significantly, cultural metrics showed shifting attitudes. A survey of business professionals under 30 revealed that 73% now viewed mixed-age teams as more innovative than homogeneous ones, a complete reversal from 2 years prior. September brought unexpected personal closure. While reviewing building inspection reports, I discovered a small memorial plaque in the basement, honoring previous building owners. James Walsh had researched the history, revealing a succession of visionary entrepreneurs who had maintained the building through various eras. "Would you like to add Aurora Holdings to the memorial?" he asked. Instead, I suggested something different. "Add this: This building serves those who honor both innovation and experience. No names, just principles. October marked my final quarterly board meeting for Henderson & Associates as an external consultant. The company had not just recovered, but excelled, expanding into 3 new markets and achieving industry recognition for ethical practices. During the meeting, discussions focused on succession planning for the current leadership. The approach had fundamentally shifted. Instead of age-based selection, criteria emphasized skill combinations that spanned generations. We're implementing mandatory mentorship partnerships for all senior positions, the board chair explained. Every leader pairs with someone from a different generational cohort. This systemic change exceeded anything I'd initially imagined as possible outcomes from my experience. November brought an invitation that truly signified transformation. The National Chamber of Commerce requested my participation in drafting federal workplace equity guidelines. The committee brought together labor law experts, business leaders, and advocacy organizations. My role focused specifically on age discrimination prevention, drawing from both personal experience and organizational data we'd collected. The guidelines would potentially affect millions of workers across the United States. During drafting sessions, I often thought about how individual injustice could become collective protection, how personal pain could evolve into societal progress. December arrived, bringing Chicago's winter magic once again. I found myself in the familiar conference room where this journey had begun. The space had been repurposed as the Foundation's corporate training center. A group of executives from a Dallas-based firm filled the seats, learning about implementing age-diverse practices. Among them sat younger managers alongside seasoned professionals, all engaged in collaborative exercises I'd developed. Watching them work together, identifying complementary strengths, building cross-generational strategies, I saw the future I'd hoped to create. Not perfect harmony, but productive synthesis. Not erasure of differences, but leverage of them. The facilitator called break time, and I spent moments with various participants. Each shared stories of workplace struggles with age dynamics, some as young professionals feeling dismissed, others as experienced workers facing forced retirement pressures. "Your story gave us language for something we all felt," one participant said. "Now we're finding ways to communicate across age boundaries that actually work." As the year drew to its conclusion, I evaluated the complete transformation. The building stood as a testament to sustainable business practices, housing diverse companies thriving through collaborative culture. The Foundation had mainstreamed mentorship models across industries. The legal precedent had strengthened worker protections nationwide. But perhaps the most profound change was attitudinal. Where once experience was quietly dismissed as obsolete, it was increasingly recognized as irreplaceable. Where youth was once automatically equated with innovation, businesses discovered that true innovation requires diverse perspectives working in concert. On December 31st, I stood in my office, on the 32nd floor, looking out over Chicago's nighttime skyline. The city sparkled with possibilities, each light representing someone's dreams, someone's work, someone's contribution. My phone buzzed with a year-end message from Patricia. Reviewing 2024 metrics. Your consulting work at Henderson resulted in 89% staff retention, record client satisfaction, and 3 national awards. Maybe getting fired was the best thing that happened to all of us. I responded, maybe justice looks different than revenge when you give it time. The following morning, January 1st brought fresh snow and new resolutions. My own resolution was simple yet profound, to continue building systems that recognize hidden value, not just in individuals but in perspectives society overlooks. The day's mail included an envelope marked confidential. Inside, a letter from Robert Henderson. Sarah, 2 years of reflection have taught me that error becomes education only when acknowledged honestly. My discrimination against you represented beliefs I'd absorbed unconsciously about age, value, and innovation. Your response, building rather than destroying, teaching rather than punishing, transformed not just our company, but my understanding of leadership itself. The frameworks you've created now guide businesses across the globe. That's a legacy that redefines what justice can accomplish. Thank you for showing that wisdom sometimes arrives through the most unlikely messengers, including our own mistakes. With respect and gratitude, Robert. I filed the letter with other documentation of this journey. Not as trophies, but as evidence that even our deepest professional mistakes can become foundations for positive change. February brought news that our model had influenced technology sector policies. Silicon Valley companies, historically resistant to age diversity, reported implementing experience integration strategies directly inspired by our work. The shift wasn't just procedural, but cultural. A Wired magazine feature titled The Wisdom Valley examined how tech giants were discovering that their most intractable problems, ethical AI development, sustainable scaling, long-term strategic thinking, required input from professionals with decades of experience. My calendar is filled with speaking requests from traditionally youth-obsessed industries. Gaming companies sought insight on building sustainable workplace cultures. Startup accelerators asked for frameworks enabling effective cross-generational teams. These engagements revealed a broader truth. My experience had served as a catalyst, but the underlying need for change had always existed. Businesses had been inefficiently allocating human resources, convinced that newer always meant better. March brought an unexpected collaboration opportunity. Netflix approached about developing a documentary series on workplace transformation stories. Our case would anchor a broader examination of how individual experiences can reshape industry norms. We're interested in the complete narrative, the producer explained. Not just the gotcha moment of owning the building, but how you transformed potential revenge into systemic improvement. I agreed, seeing the opportunity to reach audiences far beyond business conferences. Workplace equity needed popularization, not just professional validation. April marked the documentary's production launch, bringing camera crews into our building and foundation offices. The crew captured day-to-day operations, interviewed participants from various stages of the journey, and documented ongoing impacts. One particularly powerful segment featured interviews with Henderson and Associates employees who had witnessed the transformation. Their perspectives provided compelling testimony about cultural evolution in action. I learned that experience isn't just knowing what to do, shared one junior analyst. It's knowing what not to do, and why. That kind of knowledge saves companies millions in avoiding mistakes. May's arrival brought reflection on 3 years of extraordinary change. The building's value had increased by 72%, the foundation had expanded to 7 cities, and the consulting practice had influenced policies affecting over 100,000 workers nationwide. More personally, I'd transformed from a terminated employee to a recognized thought leader in organizational culture. The journey proved that even our worst professional experiences could seed our greatest contributions. During a quiet evening walk through Chicago's Millennium Park, I called Monica to discuss long-term vision. "You've created multiple platforms for change," she observed. "Now the question is, what's next?" "Integration," I replied. "All these pieces, property management, workforce development, policy influence, they're starting to converge into something larger. A new business paradigm? A new cultural framework. One that measures success not just in profits, but in sustainable human potential." By September, this convergence had taken shape. We formally launched the Aurora Initiative, an integrated platform combining property innovation, workforce development, policy advocacy, and cultural transformation. The initiative's first project involved transforming 3 Detroit buildings into collaborative excellence centers, mixed-use spaces where businesses could access age-diverse consulting, mentorship programs, and community resources. the Detroit project became a model for urban renewal through human capital investment. Property values increased not through gentrification, but through systematic enhancement of community capabilities. October brought international expansion. The Singapore partnership had evolved into a global network spanning 12 countries. Each adaptation maintained core principles while respecting cultural contexts. In Tokyo, the program integrated with traditional respect for elders while modernizing communication methods. In Sweden, it aligned with existing work-life balance frameworks. In South Africa, it addressed both age and racial equity simultaneously. These global implementations revealed universal truths about human potential and organizational effectiveness that transcended cultural boundaries. November marked a significant milestone. The Aurora Initiative was selected for a United Nations Partnership Award, recognizing innovative approaches to workplace equity. At the ceremony in Geneva, I shared the platform with leaders addressing various forms of discrimination. The common thread was transformation. How individual experiences of injustice could catalyze collective progress. Discrimination creates data, I stated during my presentation. What we do with that data determines whether injustice becomes education or simply perpetuates cycles of resentment. December arrived with a sense of completion, yet also a new beginning. The documentary series premiered to international acclaim, generating thousands of comments from viewers sharing similar experiences and expressing hope for cultural change. One comment particularly moved me. I just turned 50 and was terrified about my career prospects. This documentary showed me that some of my greatest contributions may still lie ahead. On New Year's Eve, I returned to the familiar vantage point of my office. 3 years had passed since that humiliating conference room confrontation. The city lights sparkled with familiar beauty, but my perspective had fundamentally shifted. What had begun as personal injustice had evolved into systemic improvement affecting thousands of lives. What had started as hidden ownership had transformed into transparent leadership for cultural change. My phone displayed midnight messages from around the globe, foundation participants, corporate partners, policymakers, and individuals whose lives had been touched by our work, but the most meaningful message came from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I'm 47 and was just promoted to senior management thanks to my company's new policies. Your story gave me courage to stay when I was ready to quit. Thank you for showing that our best contributions often come after others try to write us off. These unsolicited connections revealed the true scope of impact. Beyond metrics and awards, beyond property values and policy changes, were individual lives transformed by systemic improvements. As the fireworks lit up Chicago's skyline, I realized that the most significant transformation had been my own perspective on power. Traditional revenge would have been temporary satisfaction. Instead, I'd discovered the enduring power of building systems that prevent future injustices. The story that began with a powerful person dismissing an outdated employee had evolved into frameworks helping countless professionals maximize their potential across age demographics. What started as one woman's response to discrimination had become a movement toward inclusive excellence. Standing at my window, watching the city celebrate new beginnings, I understood that sometimes our greatest gifts arrive disguised as our deepest challenges. The key lies not in the experience itself, but in how we choose to transform it. My phone displayed one final message as midnight struck. Looking forward to our 2025 initiatives. Together, we're redefining what's possible when experience and innovation truly collaborate. The sender was Jake Morrison, former replacement, now mentorship champion and advocate for age-diverse practices. His transformation exemplified the broader cultural shift we'd catalyzed. As the new year began, I felt not triumphant but purposeful. The work continued, the impact expanded, and the lesson remained. Underestimate others at your own peril, but More importantly, never underestimate the power of your own response to life's unexpected turns. The building stood solid beneath me, its lights joining the constellation of Chicago's skyline. Each window represented potential waiting to be recognized, value waiting to be acknowledged, and innovations waiting to emerge from unlikely collaborations. This was my true success, not revenge against those who wronged me, but transformation that prevented future wrongs. Not climbing back to my former position, but creating entirely new possibilities for others. As Chicago's winter night settled into peaceful silence, I knew that somewhere in the city, and in cities across the globe, people were making decisions that would echo through future careers and cultures. The secret landlord had become the visible advocate. The terminated employee had become the transformation catalyst. The story that began with an ending had created countless new beginnings, and that, perhaps, was the most revolutionary outcome of all, turning personal justice into collective progress, private wounds into public healing, and a single story of rejection into a universal narrative of recognition. The lights of Chicago sparkled on, each one a possibility, each one a reminder that our worst moments can become our most meaningful contributions when we choose growth over grievance, building over bitterness, and future over fear. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the newly opened Aurora Innovation Hub in downtown Seattle. 3 years after Chicago, and I found myself overseeing the 15th location of what had begun as a single building's transformation. Dr. Johnson. Lillian, my Seattle-based director, appeared with a tablet. The quarterly Global Impact Report is ready. I reviewed the numbers while walking through our open concept workspace. The design intentionally mixed standing desks with comfortable lounge areas, reflecting our philosophy that innovation happened when people could choose their environment. 712 companies officially adopted our frameworks, Lillian continued. Age discrimination complaints down 38% globally in participating organizations. Employee satisfaction metrics show consistent improvements across all age demographics. The scope sometimes overwhelmed me. That forced march from a Chicago conference room had somehow sparked a movement spanning continents. My phone chimed with a video call notification. Nordic Conference Panel, Live in 5. Right on schedule, I muttered, settling into the recording. Studio we'd built specifically for virtual presentations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Technology had made my knowledge accessible worldwide, yet corporate America had once deemed my experience obsolete. The panel connected, displaying 5 faces across my screen. Today's topic: integrating artificial intelligence with human wisdom in workplace decision-making. The paradox of our age, I began once introductions completed, is that while machines calculate probabilities, humans assess possibilities. Both perspectives become critical when major strategic decisions require evaluation. The discussion launched immediately into concrete examples. A pharmaceutical company using our dual-generation consulting teams to revolutionize drug development. Timelines. A manufacturing firm discovered that combining automation with experienced quality control oversight reduced defects by 43%. After the panel concluded, I reviewed calendar notifications. 3 foundation chapters were celebrating graduation ceremonies next week, their pilot mentorship programs completing successfully. The Detroit Collaborative Excellence Center had attracted Tesla as an anchor tenant, proving our model's commercial viability. But the message that caught my attention came from Rebecca Chen, who'd taken over Chicago's Aurora Holdings properties. Sarah, thought you'd want to see this? She'd attached a building occupancy report from 425 West Harrison Street. Henderson and Associates just signed a 15-year extension. They're expanding to occupy an entire additional floor. Their business has tripled since the restructuring. Smiled, remembering my first consultation meeting where I'd aimed for stability over revenge. Sometimes, sustainable justice created value no vindictive confrontation could match. The afternoon brought my monthly mentorship call with Omar Abdullah, a 67-year-old software engineer I'd connected through our foundation. He'd been forced into retirement before joining our program. "Sarah, I have news," Omar said, his excitement palpable through video chat. "GitHub just hired me, lead architect position for their accessibility initiatives. They specifically recruited experienced developers to ensure platforms serve all users, not just young tech workers." These stories multiplied weekly now. Real people discovering careers could extend decades beyond arbitrary cutoff points. Businesses realizing their most innovative solutions often emerged from combining fresh perspectives with deep experience. Assistant knocked, holding an elegant invitation. This just arrived by courier. The heavy cardstock announced the Global Forum for Ethical Business Innovation. My name appeared on the advisory council list, alongside executives from Apple, Microsoft, the United Nations, and Harvard Business School. The forum aimed to establish international standards for age-inclusive practices across industries. What had begun as my personal response to discrimination now influenced global policy development. That evening, I attended Chicago's annual Aurora alumni gathering, a tradition connecting everyone touched by our initiatives. The venue, a restored warehouse in the West Loop, chosen for its symbolism. Old structures transformed with modern purpose. Scanning the crowd, I recognized faces from various chapters of this journey. Jake Morrison had become a voice at tech conferences, speaking about learning humility through failure. Patricia Wong consulted internationally on ethical financial practices. Even Robert Henderson attended regularly, his evolution from antagonist to ally now complete. During the networking hour, I was approached by a young woman carrying a name tag reading, "First Year. MBA student, Northwestern." "Ms. Johnson, I hope you don't mind interrupting," she began nervously. "I wrote my admissions essay about your case study. Business ethics was my deciding factor in choosing Northwestern's program." Conversations like these revealed ripple effects beyond measurable metrics. Cultural shifts happened through individual decisions, accumulated choices, generational transmission of values. As the evening concluded, I stood on the venue's rooftop terrace, overlooking the Chicago skyline that had witnessed such transformation. 3 years of building something better from something wrong. The city lights suggested endless possibilities, each illuminated window representing someone working, creating, contributing. Buildings no longer looked like vessels for age discrimination, but spaces where generations could collaborate authentically. My phone displayed Elena, my daughter, calling from her first job in San Francisco. "Mom, guess what? Our company just adopted Aurora Initiative's mentorship program. They selected me as a pilot participant, pairing with a 20-year veteran." She paused meaningfully. "I never thought your experience would circle back to influence my career beginning. Life possessed peculiar symmetry sometimes. My story had shaped policy helping my daughter's generation value what previous workplace cultures had discarded." Walking back through Chicago's familiar streets, I reflected on an unexpected truth. Authentic power emerged not from controlling others, but from expanding possibilities for everyone. Revenge would have been a moment. Reconstruction became a movement. 3 years had transformed not just systems, but mindsets. Age diversity was becoming standard practice rather than progressive exception. Experience was increasingly recognized as competitive advantage rather than cost burden. The city sparkled with familiar beauty, but now I saw it through a transformed perspective. Every building potentially housed someone at career crossroads, someone facing discrimination, someone capable of extraordinary contributions that conventional thinking might overlook. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for systemic improvement. The Aurora Initiative was expanding into education sector partnerships, criminal justice rehabilitation programs, and rural community development projects. But tonight, simply walking home through Chicago's snow-dusted streets, I embodied a quiet truth about justice. It was most powerful when it prevented tomorrow's injustices rather than merely addressing yesterday's wrongs. The story that began with termination had evolved into transformation, not just mine, but for thousands touched by frameworks born from personal challenges converted into collective solutions. Sometimes the most effective revolution happened when you stopped fighting against what was wrong and started building what was right. To Abby. Evening snow began falling gently, each flake unique, each creating part of something larger when combined with others. Chicago wrapped itself in winter's promise of renewal, and I walked home understanding that endings were simply new beginnings, waiting for recognition. The lights of my apartment building beckoned ahead, but first I paused at the corner where this unexpected journey had truly begun, not with public humiliation, but with the decision to own a building, to invest in possibility, to believe that hidden positions could create future opportunities. Key in hand, I entered my lobby, greeting the evening doorman who didn't know his building was part of a broader story about power, equity, and transformation. Inside my apartment, I prepared tomorrow's calendar while reviewing Aurora Initiative's global metrics one final time. The numbers told stories of changed lives, prevented discrimination, empowered possibilities. But the most important measurement remained impossible to quantify: the cultural evolution making space for everyone's contribution regardless of their numerical age. As Chicago's skyline settled into nighttime beauty outside my windows, I understood that my most meaningful legacy wouldn't be buildings or programs or policies. It would be the normalized belief that value spans generations, that innovation requires diverse perspectives, and that our worst professional experiences could become our most powerful platforms for positive change. The secret landlord had become the visible advocate for invisible potential in every professional, at every career stage, in every workplace willing to transform limitation into possibility. And sometimes, late at night when the city's sounds quieted to whispers, I could almost hear careers being saved, dreams being rekindled, and futures being written by people who refused to be defined by others' expired expectations. The story continued, written now by thousands of hands across global workplaces, each chapter building upon foundations laid by one woman's decision to respond to injustice, with systems that prevented future wrongs. Chicago sparkled on, and I slept peacefully knowing tomorrow would bring new pages to this ongoing narrative of transformation. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.